Everybody, and I mean everybody, hates J.D. Vance, and at a time when we are so divided, it's good to know that at least one thing unites us, that everywhere he goes, no matter the country, the city, the town, J.D. Vance will be booed and protested to his face, and that is exactly what we recently saw in Minneapolis, and what I think is the most important example yet of Vance being booed, protested, and trolled, because it represents how little this administration actually cares about anything that they purport to, how shallow J.D. Vance is, and why everyone hates him. We are going to get into it all, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, of course, J.D. Vance was traveling to Minneapolis in the wake of a devastating school shooting that J.D. Vance cares nothing to do about, doesn't want to work in any way to make it better. All he wants to do is not protect kids, but tweet, which is exactly what Chris Murphy called him out for before we get into why Vance got booed.
Here's what the Vice President, J.D. Vance, tweeted this morning. It's shocking to me that so many left-wing politicians attack the idea of prayer in response to a tragedy. Literally no one thinks prayer is a substitute for action. First of all, nobody's attacking prayer. Prayer is important. But this idea that you are going to take action to protect our kids, nobody is believing it. In fact, we've watched this administration take action this year, and every single one of your actions has been to make it more likely that kids are going to get shot to death in schools or on the streets. Let's talk about the actions that you have taken over the last 8 months. The Trump administration from day one has undergone a relentless campaign to make our kids less safe in our communities. The first thing you did was shut down the entire Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Then you sent out orders to the enforcement agencies to essentially make it easier for criminals to be able to take guns out of bricks and mortar gun stores and put them on the black market. You installed into the most important enforcement agencies that oversee our gun laws pawns of the gun lobby. You ended funding for programs that go to schools to wrap services around kids that are in danger of engaging in violent behavior. You shut down funding for community anti-gun violence programs that were working in communities all across this nation. You have engaged in a purposeful, relentless campaign to undermine the nation's gun laws, to make it harder for schools and communities to prevent gun violence. You've done every single thing the gun industry has asked you. You've taken action. But every single action you have taken has gotten more and more kids killed in this country. So yeah, prayer's important, but it is never a substitute for action. And it is just both offensive and laughable that the Vice President of the United States thinks that he can convince people in this country that this administration is going to do anything other than implement every single thing that the gun lobby and the gun industry is asking for.
I am never surprised at how easily MAGA is able to play the victim. Senator Murphy has been a staunch advocate for gun control for years now. And for J.D. Vance to say that Christians are the one under attack, that it's people who pray who are in the most jeopardy because Chris Murphy and other Democrats, not just Democrats, everyone around the country is calling for more than thoughts and prayers. J.D. Vance saying that, saying, oh, I'm the one that they're attacking, rather than children who have lost their lives, is just such a perfect summation of what MAGA is all about. They will twist words and they will always make themselves the victims. These are people who exist in a petty personal politics that is only about them, and they don't actually care about any values they claim to have. Just take a look at the Epstein files right now, which Thomas Massie called out Vance for here.
And it was just 9 months ago that the entire administration was for releasing these files. The problem is they've done a 180-degree turn on this. You know, you mentioned that Republicans are split. Only in Congress, in the swamp, are Republicans split on this. Back home, all of my Republicans are united. They want us to keep our promise and release these files.
It wasn't too long ago that J.D. Vance was on Theo Von's podcast saying, we have to release the Epstein list, we have to release the Epstein list. But now that it's become politically inconvenient for J.D. Vance, as has been the case through his entire political career, he abandons that issue. J.D. Vance has changed his entire personality to suit his political ambition, which is why it is no wonder that people can't stand him. And we saw that in Minneapolis right here. J.D. Vance heckled by protesters at Minneapolis shooting site. J.D. Vance was met with dozens of protesters Wednesday calling for gun reforms during his visit to the site of last week's school shooting in Minneapolis. The vice president and his wife Usha visited the Catholic Church 1 week after a shooter opened fire in the pews, killing 2 children and injuring 21 others. As the Vances arrived at the church, some of the students' family members and local residents greeted them with signs calling for bans on assault weapons, the Associated Press reported. One video captured protesters yelling, "Protect our kids and do better," while Vance and Usha walked into the church. Another video shows a group of people lining the street, waving signs and flipping the bird as the Vances motorcade races by. "Listen to the Pope, end the pandemic of arms," one person's sign urged, referring to comments Pope Leo made Sunday. Other signs questioned how Vance could reconcile his pro-life stance with his reluctance to back tighter gun restrictions. "This is a political problem, like something has to be done," said Cassie Sharp, whose 8-year-old son, considered one of the victims, Fletcher Merkel, ate his best friend. "My son lost his best friend in the world because these politicians won't do anything." However, Vance sidestepped a question on Democratic Governor Tim Walz's intention to call a special session of the legislature to vote on a new gun control measure, including an assault weapons ban. "I saw that news and I talked a little bit about that with the families today." He said, "Look, I'm not going to tell Minnesota lawmakers or the governor exactly how they should respond to this tragedy. Calls for gun safety reforms have intensified following the shooting, which was carried out by 23-year-old, whose name I'm not going to say, who is believed to have used a rifle, a shotgun, and handgun that was legally purchased."
If you do have kids, if you're lucky enough to have a son or a daughter, make sure that they know that they love you. Make sure that you hug your kids tight, because there are families in Minneapolis who won't be able to do that ever again. So with that, I'll take a couple questions.
Sir, Governor Walz said that he was going to call a special legislative session to consider potentially new gun laws. What would you like to see state lawmakers do? What action would you like them to take?
Well, I saw that news and I talked a little bit about that with the families today. Look, I'm not going to tell the Minnesota lawmakers or the governor exactly how they should respond to this tragedy. I think that there's a strong desire from across the political spectrum to do something so that these shootings are less common. I think that it's important that they actually take steps that are durable, that are going to work. But besides that, I'm not an expert in Minnesota law. I won't pretend to be. I would just say take the concerns of these parents seriously. I think all of us, Democrat, Republican, and Independent, want these school shootings to happen less frequently. Hopefully there's some steps that we can take to make that happen.
Unsurprising. Of course, Vance doesn't want to talk about the actual substance, the actual policy, how to improve people's lives. He will run scared from any real issue, any real conflict. It's because it's really difficult to talk about things that matter when you don't know what matters to you. J.D. Vance is so empty and vapid that, of course, he couldn't make up his mind or take a policy stance. He is just waiting for what is politically best for him to be shown by Donald Trump or someone else who will help him climb the ladder to eventually being the Republican nominee, the only thing in this world that he actually cares about. And he's willing to throw everyone under the bus to get there, including the very Epstein victims who he said he wanted justice for not too long ago. But they are speaking up and calling out not just Trump, not just Vance, but the entirety of this administration and the pathetic Republican Party that will not bring them justice, that will not make these files public. And Jen Psaki spoke to one of those survivors last night. It's very powerful, and I hope you take it a look.
One of the women who could not be there today is, of course, Virginia Roberts Dufresne, one of Epstein's accusers who was pivotal to the federal criminal charges that were finally brought against him in 2019. Virginia Dufresne tragically died by suicide earlier this year. But today she was represented at the press conference by her brother and sister-in-law who spoke on her behalf, and many of the survivors took a moment to honor her memory. At the end of today's event, the lawyers representing Epstein survivors made sure everyone there understood how important Virginia's legacy continues to be today.
Virginia Roberts Dufresne is an American hero. Yeah. She is somebody without whom we would not be able to have this voice. She was the one who had courage to name names, speak out against people, and she was standing up against everybody at one time with an enormous amount of pressure.
And most of these women are here because of Virginia Roberts Dufresne.
Earlier today, I spoke with Virginia Roberts Dufresne's brother and sister-in-law about today's event, the calls to release the Epstein files, and what happens next. I'm joined now by Virginia Dufresne's brother, Sky Roberts, and his wife, Amanda Roberts. I want to thank both of you so much for being here, for just being tireless advocates for not only the memory of your sister, but also so many other survivors. I know you have both been a tremendous source of strength. Let me just start. I've been glued watching every detail of the last 36 hours, and there have been some incredible moments over the course of the last 2 days. I mean, Brad Edwards called your sister an American hero. Survivors said today and yesterday that they were there because of your sister. I'm gonna get emotional talking about this. I'm sorry. But how does that feel? I have siblings. I have not been through anything like you've been through. How has that felt to hear your sister called out as such a source of inspiration over the last 2 days?
We are so proud of what she was able to accomplish. accomplish over her lifetime. You know, I think many people can relate to that. You know, she's a normal person. You know, she's somebody that you could go down the street and have a drink with. But the truth is that she fought for so many brave survivors that came forward today. And something that really struck me today was, you know, in talking to some of the survivors was, you know, she was like 15 of them, you know, in one. She would just come out and point fingers and was not scared to go up against these rich and powerful men. And so, you know, and I would say today is a show of force. You know, I am so proud of these women for coming forward, for these survivors coming forward. And she should be here today. She would be here today if she could. But we are very honored and very proud of her.
Yeah, I will say I felt her in everything that they said. But even in just seeing them and sitting with them, I see so much of her in them. And so I know that she's proud of them. This was a moment that Virginia had been waiting for a very long time. And I felt her. I felt her presence there.
Today, this morning, we talked about this a little bit, but you were part of this incredibly powerful press conference on the steps of Capitol Hill. And I just wanted to, Skye, paraphrase something you said this morning, because it really stuck with me. You said if you vote no, your stance will be clear. And I think you were talking, of course, about the discharge petition. You went on to say, look these survivors in the eye and tell them why. Then look the people of the United States in the eye and tell them why. And then when you're alone, look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself why. And that is fundamentally the choice that every elected official has. What do you think they are looking, the members who have not come out and said they would support this discharge petition, what are they looking themselves in the mirror and telling themselves as to why they're not supporting it, do you think?
They have to live with that, right? I think for me, it's not about what you're saying right now, it's about what you're doing and what kind of actions are we actually bringing forth, right? We say these really fancy words, transparency and accountability, but that's not just a word, that's an action, right? So you can't just say it and then not do anything about it. I think we also need to stop redirecting the attention, right? We need to be very straightforward. We need to stop beating around the bush. And that's from the top all the way down to the bottom.
I don't know how any Republican could listen to this testimony and decide that they just don't care about an issue, let's be real, that they have just used as a political pawn. Well, it's because they're soulless, they're pathetic, they lack spines, and they'll always fall in line with Donald Trump. And that we have to call out every single day. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Then until next time, I'll see you soon.